So yeah, I'm kind of based in Trinity College, and I've worked, just a quick piece of context, worked over the last 20 years with communities on sustainability, climate change, climate action. Worked a lot in Ireland. It's kind of the order of hundreds of communities and thousands in Europe. We've worked with across a number of programs, behaviour change, practice change, looking at infrastructure and technology, and trying to create change or spark change. We're currently part of a sustainability blueprint, which was presented in New York, that the United Nations are advocating. Very supporters of that. So if you take a look, Liam was asking me to paint a picture of climate change and climate action, and that community perspective, and I've done this is my best attempt at that, really. But if you look at this graph here, on the horizontal axis you'll see the agricultural revolution to this point here, and then the industrial revolution taking off with virtually free or very inexpensive fossil fuel. You see the population of the planet rising to 1 billion during the agricultural revolution, as we collect animals and kind of automate procedures of consumption for ourselves, farming, and then as fossil fuels hit in, the hockey stick starts, and we move to 6, and where we are now is 7 billion on the planet. Huge pressure. So what I'm going to just show you briefly is a study in Ireland where you take all the emissions of a city or a town or a settlement or any community, and you add those up from all of the things we consume at home: food, water, our transport habits, of the various things we do at home, our waste assimilation, so driving to school, picking up the milk, all those bits are part of our emissions impact. Those emissions require a certain area of land and tree to absorb them on the planet. And so the foot is the footprint. You'll have heard of carbon footprints. Carbon footprints are the carbon piece, the emissions piece at the top. The ecological footprint is the size of the foot it takes on the planet for each of us to sustain our lifestyle. So each of us, because of our emissions in our daily lives, have a certain area of land required to absorb those emissions. If you take a look at the far on your left here, you'll see 79 Irish settlements, which were taken together as a representation of the average Irish community. Large urban centres and centres of a lot less density as well. So we have 79 settlements in there, and you can see there's a figure there: 4.3 global hectares, 4.3 GHA. Just 4.3 is enough for this. You can see that the green area of the pie chart on the left is virtually half of the pie chart. That's food. That's our food consumption currently, and that's an average for Ireland. We're all likely to be close to that. You'll see next to that waste. This is the waste area here. You'll see energy, so you can see the kind of size of the emissions, the size of the area of land required. Food is big, energy and waste is large as well. Energy slightly larger than waste, and this is transport for 79 Irish settlements. This is the eco-village in Cloughjordan as an example, a sustainability beacon, if you like. You can see that its total footprint is two units. This is 4.3. So it's total, what each person uses in eco-village or consumes and the emissions they provide is this large. But food is still a large portion of that. Their car transport is quite large. In fact, if you look at the car transport of the average Irish person at 0.35, you can see that the eco-village is slightly larger at 0.37. A lot of professional people have settled there, are doing good things with food and waste. The waste footprint is very small, but you can see how this footprint idea builds a knowledge of what we consume locally and how we do that. So you can see that the various communities that are presenting here today on transport, the Beara Island project with the waste management programme, all the various things that we're going to see today are reducing elements of this for their citizens and their people. So basically, in the footprint, you've the actual household's energy use. The Irish building estate is fairly leaky. There are various SEI programs trying to improve that, insulation-wise, draft-wise. You know that we have a waste epidemic. You've probably heard of the China ban the various things that are going on in Ireland at the moment, trying to, kind of single-use plastic bans and various things. But I'm sure you know, China have now refused our waste. And we now have to do something with all of that waste we were getting recycled in China. The sort of issues around that and the awareness around that needs to be improved in order for real climate action. And I think the Bear Island project will be very interesting to hear today. A lot of what we consume comes from remote areas, whether it be fossil fuel or T-shirts or various other things, and this adds to it. Supermarkets and food. I mentioned food was a massive component of the ecological footprint for the average Irish person, and even in the eco-village. You can see that food is an out-of-season food, and the various issues with food. The animal side of and dairy side of food, and indeed the food miles, or add a kind of significantly large emissions to those habits we have, as opposed to other things like maybe eating more vegetarian type foods. So part of the meat problem is, as you've probably heard, is both our dairy and our beef cattle, and the carbon dioxide and methane produced therein. I mentioned a lot of our consumption is remote, and the production for our consumption is remote. So oil is coming from distant places, for instance. Gas is coming from distant places. T-shirts are, so on and so forth. And some of the food we eat, we rarely see the consequences of what the eggs are on the supermarket shelves. But here we have, on the right, we have an organic chicken with a quality of life, and on the left we have the opposite, a battery. Here we have another consequence of remote production, where pigs are very economically, or in a great business plan in producing a kind of pork efficiently. We have mass and industrial farming. As you saw, the hockey stick rises with the emissions once the fossil fuel comes in, but you can see that the emissions are rising. Emissions would have been rising with the population increasing to 1 billion as it was. So in terms of transport and those types of emissions, air flights to various other countries, and even using aeroplanes for kind of visual stimulation like this. I mean, what an art form. Transport in terms of car use, one of the communities we worked with had an education program for children involved, and they basically, one of the children came up with a slogan to reduce the waste emissions, the transport emissions, and that was, why use a litre of petrol to buy a litre of milk? A lot of people in this commuter town were travelling to the supermarket and shops and literally parking upon the school gates to drop their children in, and there's no room, and the traffic consequences, congestion and safety, quality of life of all other people entering and leaving the school. And some people feel it's their right to park up on top of the gates. These emissions here from the motor car, and we all have various kind of inputs into that, are producing various emissions. I'm kind of focusing today on carbon dioxide and the ecological footprint somewhat, but nonetheless there are nitroxides and sulfoxides, and these are implicated more recently in cardiac and respiratory issues. So these are all related to climate action, and it always if you look at Google Maps and you home in on schools, primary and secondary schools, and if you home in on nurseries and creches, it always kind of alarms me in a planning sense how we kind of interpose in some of our busiest cross sections in our cities seem to have schools located right beside them. And in terms of the emissions consequences for children, it's absolutely massive in those, in those classrooms ventilated from the outside to the in, with things like nitroxides. Nobody is looking at the impact of this, and climate action is very important. So in short, I suppose we have done things in my view from various departments in government and in various silos and various departments in universities, and we all build our skill set. There's an engineer, there's a scientist, there's a sociologist, and people work in those kind of silos, and sometimes the connected thought, like the original Luce in Dublin, how it didn't connect, the two lines didn't connect together. Those connections are not made too easily. Overall, our impacts, you'll hear a lot in terms of climate action about rising sea level, and so we should, about the icebergs melting. the rising carbon dioxide and the position we're in, and about recently mass extinctions and various types of extinction. But there's not a lot about literally the quality of life of the animals which are across the planet which are about to become extinct. And it's that sort of, I don't know how the media how this works, but we seem to get a certain message. But for every animal that dies or every species that becomes extinct, there are hundreds of years of a very poor quality of life. And we talk about morbidity as opposed to mortality. And these things need to be tackled, and we need to do something about them. So you can see in terms of today's walled towns and climate action why this walled town would be fairly worried about erosion and rising sea levels. And back in the day, this was in 1970. So on the other side of all that, because of the multiplier effect and because we have communities here today, just as a great example, just keep an eye at the time so I don't overshoot. We do community very well in Ireland, and the sum total of all the small parts is absolutely huge. We have produced impacts in communities ourselves with small projects of for instance, 36% reduction. So over a third of their emissions is reduced over 4 years. That would fill Croke Park 5 times the amount of CO2 from a small settlement of 2,000 people that we worked with. It would fill Croke Park. The amount of gas reduced over 4 years would fill Croke Park 5 times. Croke Park is a great example of community development, of community action. It's one to be very proud of. I think it rivals the San Siro, the Bernabeu. It rivals all of these commercial operations, sporting operations across the world, and this is our community. We do community really well in Ireland, and we can tackle climate change. This is a community which reduced its footprint. I'm just going to show the slide 4 times, and as it reduces over 4 years, so you'll see something happen. This blue area will reduce, but initially the blue area is marked by kind of lines, and the top one is the home energy use in that community. It's a scale. It was at 0.9, as you can see. The waste here, the waste assimilation in that community was at about 1, as you can see on that scale. Food was about 1, and then transport, car transport, which is at the bottom, was less. It's close enough to 0.5, I think, there. The bus and the train were remarkably small in that commuter settlement. People weren't using it. That's why there's no blue out on the left. But as I go from year 1 to year 2, you'll see the total footprint of this area, which is 3.77 global hectares, reduced to 3.64 global hectares. From year 2 to year 3 of the study, you'll see it reduced to 3.26 and then to 2.72. So there's a 28% reduction in those figures over 4 years for that community. Its energy use here there's a 36% reduction on it, and on waste there was a 50% reduction in volumes. That's just an Irish community working together with an ecological footprint measurement that we provided and really doing some good stuff. That's climate action, and we can do it very well. That particular study is part of the United Nations, as I mentioned at the start, template and a blueprint. They want other communities across the world to do this now. I hope our government notice it. I hope our government do it with some more Irish settlements and fund this type of work. But nonetheless, there are Swedish and Japanese partners because of their governments, and their governments are way ahead on climate, on sort of low carbon, low carbon ideas. So basically, that's that. There are other projects we worked on, for instance, at a retrofit scheme in Drumban Upperchurch with the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So Drumban Upperchurch aren't here today, but I think Inishmore or the Aran Islands are the cooperative there. These guys are an example. They were one of the poster communities of SEAI at the start of the programme, and now they've virtually retrofitted all their homes with grants. They have a walkway across the mountain. There's a whole range of sustainability things. This on the bottom is ecotourism, and we have presentations here today and lovely walks which will kind of support this notion that an awful lot can be done by community. People come to see this community's low carbon transition, how they've done it, and then they make those nice walks around the village and they stay the night or two. These particular group were from Brussels. So that's Drumban up at church. Here we have just a cross-cut of a number of communities. We have Bear Island here on the waste, with their waste programme today. Top right here, we have the Cashel Zero Waste, another walled town. We have a Zero Waste Pro pilot funded by the EPA there. Top left, we have another ecotourism idea in Monaghan, a hotel, top left, owned and run by its community, a hotel. I walked around Kilmallock today, and there's probably opportunities for that type of idea and some collaboration. If there are tourists coming in, they surely need to stay. Community led and community owned is the way. Next to that, there's a library of things. There are various food growing campaigns in Galway City. There's the Clonakilty bike scheme. You'll see the bike outside. This scheme here is the Clare Accessible Transport. It started off as ECAT, East Clare, but they bring you from your door to your destination at a fee that is not too remarkable at all. It's nowhere near the price of a taxi. Anyone who's caught the bus in Ireland, like I do, I use public transport and cycle a lot myself, you will realise that you get 5 minutes, thanks Liam. Realise that you get very wet while waiting for that bus, which is probably more than 5 minutes late. And if you're anything like me, if my socks get wet, I'm home. I can't work, I can do nothing. I have to go home for a dry pair of socks, and then I go back to the bus, and sure, same thing again. So, but basically this Clare Accessible Transport are a great initiative. They're bringing people, employing 19 people in County Clare, a community-owned bus company. And I think it's a great initiative just to talk about kind of supporting the whole idea of sustainable transport, the Clonakilty bike scheme. This is on Metal Rover here in Galway City, another community bike scheme where they advocate and lobby for cycling. They'll fix your bike for free, or you can make a donation, and they'll provide you with a bike too. They recycle bikes for the local authority. So there are various schemes. In the middle, there's a supermarket owned by a community. Across on the left, we have we have kind of communities of faith. So there's a lot going on in Ireland. We have a currency, we have an apple press. We have here in Cloughjordan, we have an amphitheatre now that the Cloughjordan eco-villagers have installed. And Elisa O'Neill, you'll know her, a young Irish songwriter. She's going to perform there, or has there just recently. Or is about to. These are the Aran Islanders with the renewable energy, and there's various others. This is Walk, a community-led project in Dublin in Walkinstown, and they work with people who are intellectually disabled, and they bring them basically to the workplace and build agency and confidence, and work with them in that way, supporting them back, kind of like to confidence and better quality of life. So this, like in terms of community and community-led stuff, Ireland, I think we do it very well. Far left at the bottom, there's a project there. It's just off the screen slightly. It's called Gab in County Cork, where they tell stories. They shoot into a particular event centre outside in someone's patio. 10 to 20 people meet for the evening, and they just tell stories. I think it's a wonderful way of sharing. So all these kind of the social side of sustainability and the betterment of that, improvement of the quality of life. So just there's some edible landscapes there and various other things. The last one I'll mention is the Library of Things, which is second from the left at the top. Library of Things, as you know, is why would you need a power washer? Why do you need a chainsaw or various things? If you only use them once every second year, some communities are building stocks of these things and letting them out to people. There's a whole range of community ideas, and just starting with Croke Park, if you take that as the exemplar for the rest of us, it really is all these hundreds of years of GA and how it has culminated, and to realise that in terms of sustainability, in terms of social betterment and sport and endeavour for our youth and for all ages, it surely is a good thing for community, and community do that very well. A project I'm very busy with at the moment is Spark Change. We're trying to support communities. We have resources in this. It's called sparkchange.ie. There's a resource tab. You can have a look for resources in there. If you're community based and you want to improve things, you can give us a call and we can try to support. There's a stories page where you can tell the story of your community so that others can sort of learn about the good work you're doing. And I'd like to bring some stories, or to think that some of the communities here today might log on for 5 minutes, provide a picture of their endeavour and just a small description. It's a template. It won't take very long. We've built it so that it's short and sharp, 5 to 10 minutes. And who knows, somebody in Cork or in Tipperary, somebody in Derry, they might see this and it might spark something for them. And then we have a challenge at the moment. There's 70 communities in a challenge to improve their sustainability, and we're trying to work with them. This is the story page. There's various projects on that. The Aran Islanders that were going to be here, or maybe are here today, are one of the Spark Change communities, second from the left there. Galway Civic Trust, Tom is here today. There are various projects who are part of the Spark Change project. So here we have a scheme. I ask you to join 5 others in a room. I take each one of you individually into another room. There's 5 people, and I ask which line is the same length as X. How many of you what would you say? Which line is? B is, for me as well, the same length as X, and I think 99% of people in tests would agree with you, so that was a good call, very good call. But in this time I bring you to the room, and the other 5 people are plants. And each one of them says, no, in fact, it's not line B, it's line C. So I asked the first person, which line is the same length as X? You're there with the others. And the first person says, it's line C. And you're there like, how could it be line C? And then the second person says, it's line C. And you're there, no, it couldn't be. The third person, the fourth, and the fifth person says it. Now, that may wear some people down, I guess, and they might say line C. How many of you would say line C? Well, the power of norms is that 75% of people do say C. We do change our mind. And it's really important, and even just in terms of the simple things like messaging in a community campaign, that you use those norms and that you broadcast serial community action. This is a collective thing. It's working well. We've done this. We've done that together. Thank you for all the volunteers who supported this. You know, this is the way to go with norms. And norms work off. So if somebody does a certain thing here, there's a lift experiment. One last thing I'll say. There's an escalator experiment on YouTube. You should have a look at it. The people going to work in a common up whatever it is 50 floors in an escalator, and that's okay. That's what they do every morning. But we put some plants in, and they basically go into the lift, and there's a door each side. But everybody knows which side once you get in, which side and they face that side they're going to get out. You know, they all face one way because they know that's the door out. But the plants who get into the lift. The door is. I get getting into the lift. There's a door here, and a door here. There's 10 other people looking at the way out, and looking at floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, floor. And the 2 plants in the thing just go like this, and they wait here, and they look at this door, and they put that sort of social pressure on all the other people in the lift. You should have a look at the escalator experiment to see what happens to the other people. Do they turn or not? But I'm not going to tell you. So we can do things together, and I'm all ears and very excited about what Liam and the Heritage Council put together here for us today. I think it's an absolutely great show of climate actions in community. So, thank you.